All right, it looks like the number of folks logging in is slowing down, so I think we've got a critical mass. So we will get started. Good morning, everyone. This is Jeannie Wardwaller. I'm the fairly new Deputy Director for Planning and Modal Programs. Welcome to the first virtual, I believe the first virtual CFAC meeting during this COVID period. We're forced to meet online, which is unfortunate. I would have liked to have my first meeting as the chair of this committee be in person so I can see you all and interact a little bit more. But nevertheless, here we are. Thank you for joining us. It looks like we've got we're up to 60 folks on the line. So hopefully we will have time for some discussion and interaction throughout the agenda and feedback from you. I know we've got a lot of very exciting topics on the agenda. So Allison or Yatman, it looks like Allison's controlling the screen. Can you jump ahead to the next slide, or the housekeeping slide? I don't know if the advancing is delayed on my end. I still see the title slide.
Yeah, Allison will be advancing it.
Okay.
There's a little lag, Jeannie, so please, my apologies.
No problem. You can't have a virtual meeting without some technical difficulties. So maybe I'll just jump in. What's on the housekeeping slide is, just a few things to note. We are recording this meeting, so just FYI, keep your questions obviously related to the topic of the meeting. So we'll get all of that recorded. And I think it looks like the easiest way to do that is through the Q&A kind of chat box at the bottom. Please make sure that your full name and your organization is displayed. I think when you in the bottom of your calendar invite, there should be some instructions on that. Everyone will be muted just so we don't get background noise, since we've got a lot of folks on the phone. If you want to speak, if you want to ask a question, you should have the raise hand option, which in your participant panel is, I think, right next to your name. I think that's the way to do it. And then if you are dialing in from a phone, the way to raise your hand is to press *9. And the moderators will unmute you and give you a chance to speak. So we'll try to keep track of questions in the order of which the hands are raised, or questions in the chat box. Don't forget that you actually have to lower your hand. You have to re-click the hand button to put your hand back down after you've asked a question. Otherwise, we'll think you have another question. And when you ask a question in the chat box, you should select all participants so everyone can see your question when it comes up. And then last note, the recording should be available 2 weeks after the meeting. So we'll send a follow-up link to share the recording. All right, I think those were the key housekeeping notes. We will take a break in the middle of the agenda. So I know we've got a pretty long meeting this morning, and we'll try to break it up a little bit in the middle, because I know sitting in front of the WebEx can be tedious for too long. All right, so next, I'm just going to go over the agenda. You've got half of it here in front of you. It's on 2 slides. First, we will have Avital Barnea from KELSA, who will start us off talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and impacts to freight. And then after that, let's see, I'm getting a note here that we have a slight change to the agenda. Marlon was going to give an update on the freight mobility plan and sustainable freight action plan. And we've shifted that a little bit. We're now going to have Marlon talk about the CFMP, the freight mobility plan. And then we're going to have an interagency team talk about the sustainable freight action plan. So we've split that item from our original planned agenda. And then the last item before the break will be Scott Sauer talking about the interregional transportation system plan update. We will try to take a break in the middle of the morning. In the second half of the agenda on the next slide, we will have a discussion about SB 743. And we've got a couple of folks from our 743 team that will be joining us to discuss that. Yatman will go over some charter amendments for CFAC. And then we will round out the agenda with roundtable from some of our partners, FHWA, CTC, CalSTA, and Caltrans. And finally, we've got time for public comment. So that is the agenda. Any questions, concerns before we jump in, or anything else I didn't add, Yatman, at the outset?
No, Jeannie, you've included everything. Thank you.
Okay. This is a little bit funny without seeing people's faces. I feel like I'm just talking into the out into the virtual world here. All right. So next slide. I just, as I said, because this is my very first CFAC meeting, I'm fairly new in my position. We have a number of new executives at Caltrans, as you are probably very familiar with at this point, including our new director and chief deputy, Director Tok Tomashakin. If you've had a chance to meet and talk with him, which I imagine many of you have, you'll know about his 5 priorities, which he talks about every chance he gets. And, certainly those items which are shown on the slide here, notably there's 6 on the slide. We've added equity in as well, because that is a really key topic that the department is very focused on right now. And I would say, we're also in the midst of developing our new strategic management plan within Caltrans. So I just wanted to, remind you of these and speak briefly about them at our outset. And I think, with the leadership changing happening at Caltrans, we really are embracing, the culture change and sort of this new set of goals for the department in terms of where we're going, moving away from just being the Department of Highways and really being a, future-looking multimodal transportation department. So I think, I just want to touch on all of these and kind of what they mean for CFAC and why they're particularly important to me in my role in overseeing the planning and modal programs. So safety is, of course, obvious. We have a really alarming number of fatalities and serious injuries on the state highway system. As Tok says very passionately, 10 people die per day on our system. 3 of those are vulnerable users, people walking and biking, people at higher risk. The safety is just, a constant for us. Has always been the top priority, and we're really, trying to make it even more of a focus, being proactive and addressing safety for all users in a much more systemic way. And of course, that applies very importantly to the freight sector and how we're, doing projects such as grade separation, separating users and space that are at higher risk. So we always want to put that forward and reiterate that. Modality or I use the term, multimodalism as well. This is of increasing importance to the department and also to the transportation agency. We've been making a big focus on complete streets and transit and rail, and that focus is just increasing even more and really working on having an integrated system. Of course, the freight goods movement sector is a key piece of that, and there is a really big emphasis on multimodal goods movement, which I think ties in nicely with the next two priorities, both innovation and efficiency. How do we make more efficient use of our system and really innovate in our efforts to move people and goods around the system? Those things are critically important, and I think with SB1, with the focus on fixing it first, we're really acknowledging as a state that our highway system is very heavily impacted, mostly built out, and we are now looking for more efficient and innovative ways to move people and goods on our system. So nowhere is that more important than the goods movement sector, where the industries are obviously continuing to grow. We need to increase our capacity to move goods on our system, but do it in the most efficient possible way. So I think that applies to both, how we work, how we deliver our projects, but also, just how we're approaching solutions to our system to improve mobility and accessibility. I want to linger on partnership for a minute because I think for me personally, partnership is critical. And I think along with partnership is really deep engagement and good communication. So this has, certainly partnership's been critical to our success all along. But I want to acknowledge that the department hasn't always been great at communicating our goals and being really accountable and transparent about how we're making decisions. So I really stress this in my role and with all of my programs that communication and engagement need to be bigger priorities. We really need to be very upfront in our communication and communicate early and often. So I think partnership both for the director and I would say also personally for me it's hugely important. And hopefully part of what we're doing here with you today is demonstrating that strong partnership and communication. So I hope we can make this an engaging meeting despite the virtual format. And finally, I want to just hit on equity. I think we all have been, very much aware of how racial injustice is a key issue in the media, nationally, certainly in the state, in all of our neighborhoods and cities across the state. There's a huge amount of attention on this right now. I will say Caltrans has been very focused on equity and has been engaged in a program called the Government Alliance for Race and Equity for several years. We are really trying to up our game in this area and focus even more on our low-income, disadvantaged communities in the state, and particularly Black and Brown communities, and how can we better serve them with the work that we do in transportation. So that, again, impacts the freight and goods movement sector. There are certainly communities that are really heavily impacted by, a lot of truck movement, air quality, safety issues. And so we really want to put a lens on that even more going forward. I know it's one of the priorities already that we've been talking about with you, but just so you know that this is really, I think, a priority that is elevating in importance within Caltrans and under our current leadership. So more to come on that, and look forward to engaging all of you on that issue as well. So I think at the risk of going on and on, I will stop there and say just that I'm very honored to join this committee to serve with all of you, to focus on our freight sector and how we can partner with you even more to advance these goals. And just really look forward to more discussion and, to the extent we can continue to make this a really useful space and maybe even improve how useful it is to you so that you can stay really engaged. We look forward to doing that. So welcome your feedback anytime, and just look forward to the meeting and the discussion today. So I think I was even more succinct than I had planned to be, and we're a little bit ahead of schedule. I think we can jump to the next item, and I'll invite Avital Barnea, who's the Deputy Secretary for Transportation Planning at CalSTA, to lead us in on the next item.
Great. Thank you, Jeannie. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be able to join you remotely and tell you a little bit about what we've been doing at CalSTA, along with our freight partners, to respond to the COVID-19 impact. Next slide, please. I did a quick look at the attendee list, and I recognize most of the names, but just for a quick overview of who we are at CalSTA, we're located in Sacramento. We were created in 2013 to be sort of an umbrella over the state transportation functions, including Caltrans, the DMV, the High-Speed Rail Authority, the California Highway Patrol, and the other entities that you see here on this slide. As an agency, we help to make sure that transportation functions in the state are coordinated, and we are led by Secretary David Kim, who reports directly to Governor Gavin Newsom. Next slide, please. Again, I'm sure that I'm probably preaching to the choir with this slide, but as you all know, California is very much a freight state. We have a population of nearly 40 million people, and we are the 5th largest economy in the world. Our freight system connects California to the rest of the country through several multimodal corridors that provide access to every state in the nation, as well as international gateways that connect the state to our trading partners in other countries. California's freight system is comprised of 12 seaports with numerous private port and terminal facilities, 12 airports with major cargo operations, 2 Class 1 railroads, and 27 short-line railroads that operate over 6,500 miles of track, 5,800 miles of interstate and state highways, 7 land border ports of entry with Mexico, approximately 19,000 miles of hazardous liquid and natural gas pipelines, a vast warehousing and distribution sector, and thousands of local connector roads that complete the last mile. Next slide, please. As with nearly every facet of our lives, COVID-19 brought challenges to the freight sector through disruptions in supply chains and from impacts related to stay-at-home orders. However, the movement of goods is paramount to our quality of life and to the economy, and so in accordance, on March 19th, 2020, Governor Newsom issued Executive Order N3320, which directed all residents to stay home, except as needed to maintain continuity of operations of essential critical infrastructure sectors to protect public health and well-being of all Californians. The executive order was accompanied by industry guidance, including for the transportation and logistics sector, which provides direction for essential businesses to support a safe, clean environment for employees. At CalSTA, we provided input to the California Division of Occupational Safety and Health and the California Department of Public Health on this guidance, informed by frequent communication that we have maintained with you all in the freight industry throughout the pandemic. In addition, CalSTA has been monitoring impacts to freight and to all transportation throughout the state, and we have taken several steps to do our part to ensure that both freight and passenger transportation remain operational as the essential they are. Next slide. For example, CalSTA is in frequent communication with our seaport and freight industry partners, including many of you, to monitor operations, workforce health and safety, cargo volumes, and movement of essential commodities and supplies. Throughout the pandemic, California's seaports have remained fully operational, although they have each been impacted by effects from COVID-19 in varying ways. For example, the ports of San Diego and San Francisco which rely heavily on tourism and passenger cruises for income, those are two revenue sources that have essentially dried up during the pandemic. Other ports, such as Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Oakland, have faced reductions in imported cargo as manufacturing in China slowed due to the virus and consumer demand declined. In particular, the ports of San Diego and Wainimi saw a big loss in automobile imports, especially in May and June. Across all ports, vessel schedules have been less predictable during the pandemic, and several scheduled ships have been canceled, known in the industry as blank sailings. And in addition, other ports, such as Stockton and San Diego, have seen substantial financial impact from tenants seeking rent relief during the crisis. And all ports have had some employees shift from their regular work duties to focus on COVID-19. For example, this includes Port of Los Angeles Executive Director Gene Soroka, who, in addition to his job as the CEO of the Port of Los Angeles, was appointed by Mayor Garcetti to lead the Logistics Victory Los Angeles effort to distribute critical health care and emergency supplies. However, while volume at California ports has been reduced by 12 to 50% in some cases, business has remained strong during the pandemic, including the import of fertilizer, produce and steel, and the export of rice and wood chips. Furthermore, we are hearing that the numbers for imports and exports are looking better over the next few months, and that there will hopefully be noticeable improvement in July and August, especially if stay-at-home orders can be lifted. Next slide, please. Shifting from seaports to land ports of entry, on March 21st, non-essential travel restrictions went into effect between the U.S. and Mexico. However, these restrictions do not apply to cross-border freight transport. Throughout the pandemic, U.S. Customs and Border Protection continues to process all commercial ports of entry at the California-Mexico border in a normal manner, although cross-border freight volumes have fluctuated. For example, from February to April, there was a 20% decrease in cargo entering the U.S. from Mexico, which was linked to the closure of truck and auto plants across Mexico to comply with that country's stay-home orders. However, by May, the majority of auto-related industries in Mexico had resumed production, and commercial ports of entry have since seen a 10% average increase in truck crossings from Mexico to California when comparing April 2020 to May 2020. Next slide, please. Early in the pandemic, another supply chain issue that was brought to our attention was that of increasing warehouse capacity constraints. Southern California, as you all know, is home to one of the largest clusters of warehouses in North America, where approximately 34,000 warehouses and fulfillment centers occupy over 1 billion square feet of land. In addition, the state has significant warehousing facilities near the California-Mexico border, in the Inland Empire, and in the northern San Joaquin Valley. It's important to note that warehousing relies on efficient goods movement to ensure the warehouse capacity is neither overfilled nor empty. However, due to the confluence of COVID-19 and the resulting closure of non-essential businesses, as well as U.S.-China trade tariffs and a previously strong economy, this was becoming a challenge. So for some background, in late 2018, goods started flooding into U.S. seaports in an attempt to beat new tariffs with China. This surge in imports led to an influx of goods that would not be needed right away and instead were being shelved in warehouses for exceptionally long periods of time. In addition, the strong economy led to the historically low warehouse vacancy rates of 4% or less in Northern California and near 0% in Southern California. Even before COVID-19 was upon us, this resulted in a situation where nearly all warehouse space in California was leased, and nearly all of those warehouses were filled to capacity. Adding to this issue, the pandemic and resulting stay-home orders led to the temporary and even permanent closure of non-essential businesses. Goods such as clothing, furniture, seasonal merchandise, and others that are usually sold in retail stores or malls were not moving out of warehouses because the stores were closed or the market for those goods had evaporated. In addition, with unemployment levels skyrocketing, many Americans suddenly did not have the resources to purchase non-essential goods. So in response, U.S. retailers canceled orders but many goods were already on their way to California's seaports before the COVID-19 pandemic shut retailers' doors, since the travel time for these shipments is several weeks. With warehouses already at or near capacity, beneficial cargo owners were urgently seeking temporary off-site storage locations for new inventory. In addition, the canceled goods orders resulted in canceled sailings, which in turn reduced the number of ships coming in that could remove empty containers from the port. Also, we were concerned that non-essential goods or empty containers might build up at U.S. ports, causing congestion that could delay the transport of essential goods such as food and medical supplies. So in response, we worked closely with the private freight industry, including the ports, warehousers, and truckers, to determine if and how the state could provide assistance. This led to the development of policy options to address warehousing constraints, such as identifying temporary goods storage locations, including on state land if needed. Fortunately, approximately 70% of the goods coming through California's ports during the early stages of the pandemic were considered essential, and therefore no direct intervention by the state was needed. However, we were prepared to intervene if it would have been necessary for the health and safety of Californians. Next slide, please. Another way we've helped ensure that the transport and delivery of essential goods wasn't stalled due to the effects of COVID-19 is by increasing the truck weight limit. In early April, Caltrans announced it would temporarily issue special permits for overweight trucks transporting emergency supplies across the state. These special permits increased the maximum allowable gross vehicle weight from 80,000 to 88,000 pounds for trucks moving essential goods in support of relief and preventative measures associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. Under this emergency declaration, essential goods are defined as medical supplies and equipment related to the testing, diagnosis, and treatment of COVID-19, supplies and equipment necessary for community safety, sanitation, and prevention of community transmission of COVID-19, such as masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, soap, and disinfectant, food, paper products, and other groceries for emergency restocking of distribution centers or stores, raw materials such as paper, plastic, or alcohol that are required to be used for the manufacture of essential goods, fuel and equipment, supplies, and persons necessary to establish and manage temporary housing, quarantine, and isolation facilities related to COVID-19. Next slide. Furthermore, we wanted to make sure that not only was the transport of essential goods flowing, but that essential workers had access to personal protective equipment such as hand sanitizer and masks. In April, CalSTA worked with the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development and the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services to survey freight industry stakeholders about their needs and access to PPE supplies. We reached out to 150 freight industry groups, including trucking companies and ports, which resulted in the direct shipment of PPE to those who indicated that they were in need of masks and hand sanitizer to continue safe operations. In addition, in May, the California Highway Patrol started on-site distribution of masks to truck drivers at 10 locations across the state. The state has also provided thousands of masks and other PPE to passenger transportation in the state, including transit agencies and paratransit providers. Next slide, please. In addition to keeping essential workers safe on the job, we are also trying to make sure they have access to a hot meal. While the transport of essential goods continued during the pandemic, with restaurants closed, truck drivers had few options for finding food while on the road. So in response, in April, Governor Newsom signed an executive order temporarily eliminating restrictions on commercial food vending at Caltrans rest areas. The truckers could have expanded dining options at a time when several restaurants have shut down. At its peak in May, 18 private food trucks were operating at public rest areas across the state, providing a variety of food options to truck drivers and others who might be on the road during that time. Next slide, please. As you know, restaurants were certainly not the only businesses to close. However, you might not know that in order to minimize the spread of COVID-19, all of California's DMV's 69 field offices around the state were also closed to the public starting on March 27th. Again, we did not want to impede the flow of essential goods. The DMV issued extensions for all expiring California commercial licenses and endorsements through September 30th, 2020. In addition, during the field office closures, commercial drivers were granted the ability to submit medical certificate updates for their licenses through the DMV's expanded virtual field office. Select DMV offices reopened to the public in May to process transactions for commercial drivers that could only be accomplished in person, including vehicle inspections and basic control tests. And in mid-June, all DMV offices were reopened throughout the state. However, the expanded capabilities of the DMV virtual field office remain and will be a lasting positive outcome of the coronavirus response. Next slide, please. There are several other potential lasting impacts that we are keeping in mind as we look to the future of freight in California. For example, with the relaxation of truck size and weight restrictions, as well as decreased average daily traffic due to more people working from home, trucks may be able to maneuver more freely on highways and streets. Furthermore, due to supply chain impacts felt over the past few months, there may be greater desire to bring back certain critical pieces of manufacturing domestically, such as medical supplies, rather than importing those goods from overseas. This could mean that California's ports may receive less cargo coming from Asia in the future. In addition, contactless delivery has become hugely popular, and demand will likely increase for first and last mile deliveries that avoid human to customer interaction, including automated delivery vehicles. In general, we are also seeing a change in consumer behavior to buying in bulk and shopping online, which could also leave lasting marks on the supply chain and delivery service. And lastly, due to the uncharted territory of COVID-19 presented to all of us, pandemic response policies and guidances were being drafted in real time. Inconsistencies across states and counties presented challenges, including to truck drivers, who, for example, may be required to wear a mask in one place but not another. The experiences and lessons learned from this pandemic will certainly impact future policies, including hopefully providing more uniform guidance across the nation for supply chain work. Next slide, please. While we don't know what the future holds, from the actions I've described today, I hope you can see that we are actively working to maintain California's prominence in the freight sector. Before COVID-19, models anticipated a massive growth of truck flows from California to the rest of the country, with trucks bringing goods into and out of California's seaports and major urban areas over the next 2 decades. We are proud that California has the most extensive, least polluting, highest capacity, and most technically advanced multimodal freight transportation system in the United States. And even after coronavirus, we are planning for California to remain a freight leader and are working to ensure a clean, efficient, extensive, and innovative California freight future that serves every state in the nation as well as our global trading partners. Next slide, please. So with that, thank you for your attention. I'm not sure if we're doing Q&A, but if so, I'd be happy to take any questions.
We do have a few minutes. Thank you so much, Avital. I'm going to just ask the team here if there are any questions in the chat or folks that have their hands raised.
So I'm just going to read a question from Nancy Pfeiffer from Gateway Cities. Thank you, Avital, for all the great information. Regarding the extra truck weight allowance, does this rule waiver have an end date? Does it override local restrictions on truck weight? If so, I'm thinking cities may need help restoring street condition.
I am not aware that it has an end date. Does anyone from Caltrans know the answer to that? on the question?
This is Jeannie. I believe it's just during the emergency order, but we can get back. We can follow up on a specific sunset date and get back to you, Nancy, on that. We'll put that as a follow up for the meeting.
Thank you, Jeannie. Yeah, that's a good clarification. Yeah, and it's only for those essential goods categories, so it's not for all trucks. But yeah, Nancy, we'd be happy to get back to you on that one.
All right, and then Frank Ramirez from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development has his hand raised. So, Frank, I'm going to unmute you, and you will be able to ask your question. 1 second.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, Frank. Hello.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Avital. Appreciate that information. I just wanted to add that, since about 2006, the freight industry has been actually bleeding market share slowly to other ports on the Gulf Coast, on the East Coast, at about 20%, by about 20%, just short of that. And I'm wondering what we can do to try to shore that up. I understand some of your data that suggests the freight industry is still moving very strong, and it is. However, nonetheless, on the larger picture, we are losing market share. And I know originally that was addressed somewhat in the CFMP, but the second version of it is not addressed as strongly, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Yeah, we're certainly aware of that. I know that imports in the Gulf and on the East Coast have been becoming more competitive and attracting business, but the fact is that, California is still a huge market in itself, and in order to serve our state of 40 million people, we're still going to be receiving quite a bit of freight through our ports here locally. But, I think that's a function of CFAC to work with all of you and get your ideas for what we can do to help maintain California's leadership as the strongest freight nation in the state, or in the country, excuse me. So yeah, we're certainly aware of that. And we also want to make sure that we are meeting our greenhouse gas emission targets, that we have a clean freight sector in the state. So it's sort of a balancing act, but thank you for mentioning that, Frank, and I look forward to working with everyone on CFAC to help solve that problem.
Alrighty, we have a hand raised from Tina Backstrom from Los Angeles World Airport. So, Tina, I'm going to unmute you, and you can ask your question. Go ahead.
Are you there, Tina?
It looks like
I hear you.
It looks like her hand. She might have taken her hand down. So I'm gonna. Okay. Tina, did you have a question? I just unmuted.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry.
Hi. I was like,
we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I was muted. Okay. So my question is about the access to drivers. So you know how in the move to how we move people and goods, right? And of course, because of COVID, the DMVs were shut down and so forth, and you talked about how license renewals were extended. But what about the need for, or was there any thought given to the need for new drivers, being that some of the existing drivers may have been sick, and just the fact that a lot of drivers didn't want to go in because of the chance of getting sick, things of that nature, of how to allow for licensing of the drivers for those particular class of vehicles, so that we can expand, just to be able to provide additional drivers.
Yeah, so that was one of the reasons that the DMV opened for select commercial functions only in May, to try to help process these commercial transactions that can only happen in person. Like, for example, new drivers. This was certainly a concern that we were hearing, and I also certainly acknowledge and understand some drivers' hesitance to be out on the road during the pandemic. Now that all of the DMVs have reopened, we have a backlog of 280,000 drive tests that had to be canceled during the months that the DMV was closed. And so several DMVs, have extended hours. They're open on Saturdays now. So we're trying to get through that backlog. But it's affecting both commercial driver's licenses and just regular passenger car driver licenses. So we're trying to get through it, but thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you.
All right, Avital. One more question from Michael Cano from LA Metro. Thank you for the great presentation. And the question is CalSTEP preparing to develop a white paper on these freight-related COVID-19 impacts and aftermath discussion?
That's not something we've talked about, but it might be a good idea. I know I've been asked to speak on this a couple times, and so has the secretary, and so it might be something we want to formalize for our team. Thank you, Michael, for the idea.
Alrighty, and that is it for the questions and the raised hands.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Karen.
you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Avital. We are still a minute ahead of our agenda. So our next item is we've got Marlon Flournoy, the Division Chief of Transportation Planning at Caltrans, to talk about the California Freight Mobility Plan. Take it away, Marlon.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sounds great. Well, I'm extremely excited to talk about our California Freight Mobility Plan. If you can advance to the next slide. We're actually going to be finalizing the document and posting it to our website on Monday, July the 20th. So we're extremely excited about that. And CFAC will be notified once it's posted. We're currently developing a plan to prioritize and implement the most important strategies listed in the CFMP. And I'm going to be talking about some of the examples in the next slide. Additionally, we're actually going to be beginning work to develop new scope of work for the next CFMP 2025. And we want to make sure that the next CFMP scope will address the freight needs of California and our partners. And we want to make sure that CFAC is going to be very much a part of that process. And we also just want to reiterate how much we appreciate CFAC's involvement in the development of the CFMP 2020. Your feedback and input have been invaluable throughout the process, and we're extremely thankful for your continued partnership and assistance with the freight activities. And I also just wanted to take an opportunity to thank our Caltrans freight team. Due to their hard work and commitment, we've been able to get this plan to the finish line. Next slide. I did just briefly want to talk a little bit about some of the strategies that that we've developed in partnership with CFAC. We want to make sure that we are, really looking forward to moving forward with, key examples where we can actually get this plan to implementation. So under the multimodal goal, we have an objective to develop, manage, and operate an efficient and integrated freight system. So we want to have a strategy that's identified in the plan where we're giving priority to freight plans, projects implementing state-of-the-art and demonstration technologies related to the economic prosperity goal. We have an objective to promote economic development by investing in freight infrastructure projects and operational improvements. So there's a strategy to collaborate with the freight industry to identify critical projects and to develop strategic investment strategies, including public-private partnerships. Under the environmental stewardship goal, have an objective to continue to integrate environmental health considerations into freight planning, development, implementation, and operations of projects as feasible. So we've identified a strategy to encourage the freight mode shift to rail and water to reduce vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions from roadway freight transport where and when viable. Under the Healthy Communities goal, there's an objective to prioritize social equity for freight-related projects by developing alternative methods to avoid or mitigate negative impacts on or near existing communities adjacent to high-volume freight routes and facilities. And so there's a strategy to implement projects in freight corridors that are specifically targeted to avoiding, reducing, or mitigating freight impacts on the environment and communities. Under safety and resiliency, there's an objective to reduce the rates of incidents, collisions, fatalities, and serious injuries associated with freight movements. So we have a strategy to expand truck parking facilities. Then lastly, under our asset management goal, we have an objective to apply preventative maintenance and rehabilitation strategies using sustainable freight practices. And so there's a strategy to identify maintenance and preservation needs on priority freight corridors. And we want to ensure that as we implement the plan, that we're seeking freight projects and efforts that align with the state's goals, not only the key ones that I just talked about, but for all the goals and objectives that we've identified in the plan. Next slide. So I did want to take a little opportunity here to talk about the implementation of the CFMP. This is really going to be key. We want to ensure that we're not having a project that's just going to sit on the shelf and collect dust, but we're actually taking actionable and meaningful steps towards implementation. Last month, our freight office in Caltrans began surveying stakeholders to determine what their freight priorities are. Stakeholders include Caltrans districts, their partners, CFAC, of course, and our partner state agencies. We will also be seeking input from Native American tribes as well as our rural partners. Engagement is a significant component of any planning effort, and we want to ensure that this is a meaningful effort as well as a continuous one. Respondents were asked to rank the importance of freight-related issues from their perspective, including their needs and priorities. A survey was sent out to CFAC members and alternates yesterday, and responses are due July 31st. So we're looking forward to seeing that. Survey responses will help us create a work plan that will help us shape our freight program in the coming years. And we look forward to sharing this plan with you once it's drafted. Responses will also help us create the scope of the next CFMP. Caltrans has several freight studies that are underway that are a result of the CFMP. So we're looking forward to sharing these efforts with you all at future CFMP meetings, CFAC meetings. And we're going to continue to ask for your feedback throughout the process. All right, next slide. So with that said, do we want to just entertain questions from the CFMP update, and then we can shift over to the Sustainable Freight Action Plan updates?
That I think makes sense, Marlon. Getting the CFMP out is a big accomplishment. It's certainly been an effort that we've engaged this group with a lot. So we'd love to hear from you on this milestone, and if there's any questions going forward. Karen, have any come up in the chat or any new raised hands? I'll remind folks, once you've asked your question, to take your hand down. Otherwise, it looks like you have another question. I see Frank's hand is still up. I don't know if that's a new question or an old question, Frank. To push the raise hand button again to bring it down. Okay, it looks like it was an old hand.
So,
any other questions that you see? Go ahead.
Yeah, so there is a question from Nancy Pfeiffer. Marlon, congrats on the CFMP and hoping COGS can contribute to the next one. Will the Healthy Community Strategy include any funding for initiatives such as the I-710 Clean Truck Program?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I can say that this is a very important program, that Caltrans does support, and that I think there are going to be a number of different opportunities for Caltrans to partner, with agencies in the LA region to help implement the program. So I think the short answer to that is, in any way possible, as Caltrans can be helpful, we're going to help, look for opportunities to fund programs such as that, such as the 710 program, where it does have tangible benefits, to reducing greenhouse gases and improving the health of communities. So we're certainly supportive of those and other efforts throughout the state, that have a similar benefits. And that will, I think, be part of the implementation aspect.
Thanks, Marlon. I see a couple more questions coming up. It looks like Bill McGavin has his hand raised. So maybe let's go to Bill McGavin and unmute him.
Hi, good morning.
Bill?
Yes, can you hear me?
Hi, Bill. Yep,
Yeah.
can hear you.
Okay, great, thanks. Bill McGavin with Coalition for Clean Air. I want to thank you for including in the plan the goals on environmental stewardship and healthy communities. And I'm wondering if I could hear a little more, either now or at a later time, about how those goals will be implemented. So, trying to avoid impacts and prioritizing projects that do that. How will that actually be put into practice at the project level? And the 710 example being one that we're particularly interested in.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. As I mentioned, my team, we are putting together a work plan that will allow us to, start partnering, with a variety of stakeholders, to implement the CFMP. One of the things that I'll mention is, engagement is a critical aspect, not only within planning, but in project delivery. And as we're preparing any project, we're going to ensure that we're engaging, communities that are going to be impacted by these projects to ensure that, they have a say, as far as, providing feedback. And we want to ensure that we're taking all of those comments into account as we're moving these projects forward. And so, at least at the project level, to answer your question, it certainly is our intent, across Caltrans to ensure, that we are engaging, key stakeholders as it relates to the projects. Because we as Jeannie mentioned, equity, racial equity, is a key priority for us, and we want to make sure that that's being carried out through not only our planning process but our project delivery process. So we'll definitely have more to share in that respect once we do release our work plan, and we are certainly looking forward to working with advocates such as yourself, in an effort to make sure that we are following through with these commitments, and we're looking forward to working with you.
Thanks, Marlon, and we'll be happy to offer whatever help we can.
So we have two questions here. The first one is from Commissioner Inman. Marlon, last mile freight is a huge issue and growing with COVID-19. Is this one of your focus areas?
It's certainly going to be one of our focus areas. You know, what we're starting to see, you know, as you mentioned, with you know the shifts that we're seeing in the freight sector. You know, there are going to be a number of different areas where, you know, we're going to have to make sure that we are, you know, pivoting to ensure that we're being responsive. You know, just as an example, you know, when we were developing our California transportation plan, you know, starting to see some of the broader impacts on transportation and how this pandemic has been, you know, impacting, you know, how we travel. And this also includes our freight sector. So, you know, we certainly need to make sure that we're shifting our emphasis and making sure that we're being strategic, you know, as it relates to those areas. And I would say that, you know, as we're, you know, engaging, you know, not only our districts and working with our partners, you know, the first and last mile, I think, has to be, you know, on the top of that list.
All right, Marlon, one last question from Robert Ball from Kern Cog. Were there any changes to the discussion of inland ports in the plan?
Changes from the draft document. You want to clarify?
Yes.
Hey, Marla, I could take that. This is Yamin. Good morning, everyone. Regarding the CFMP, there is the discussion or overview of the importance of inland ports. Especially, we have a pertinent goal to reduce VMT as a state. So inland ports are ideas that we have talked about in the CFMP, but no specific projects have been identified as of the final CFMP. Again, the ideas of inland port and the need for it are mentioned, but no specific projects are identified.
Thank you for the question, Robert, and thanks,
Marlon. Marlon, there's just a couple of procedural questions. There's one in the chat that just popped up about what is the date that we'll be posting the CFMP. I know we're working to get it up soon. I don't know if we have a specific date we can share.
Yeah, so Monday.
All right.
Yeah, Monday.
There we go.
Monday, the 20th of July. And there will be an email that will be sent out to the CFAC mailing list, so everyone will know once it's posted.
Thank you so much, Marlon. This is Jeannie again. I just want to reinforce, you know, Marlon's point about implementation. You know, we do produce a lot of plans at Caltrans, and I think, you know, with this one, there is just so much need to really focus on implementation. And I know we've got, you know, over 100 of you on the line here, and you were really the experts around the state on this. So we really want to engage with you on implementation, you know, utilize your expertise. So I hope we can dig into that in future CFAC. I think that's a really useful space to advise us on how we're implementing this plan.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
Jeannie, I was just going to say briefly,
You want to wrap up?
You know, I want to second that. You know, I'm extremely encouraged to see, you know, the number of people that we have on this call. You know, I know since I've been in my role, you know, I in attending different CFAC meetings, you know, I've seen some meetings where, you know, we have like low participation, and then some meetings, you know, just a ton of people. And I'm just really encouraged to see, you know, over 100 people on this call. You know, for us to really, I think, make meaningful steps in implementation, you know, it is going to really require, you know, everyone's involvement to ensure that, you know, we are able to, you know, maintain the momentum. So I just want to really thank everyone for your participation, you taking the time out of your busy schedules to call into this meeting, and hopefully in future meetings, you know, you'll have that same energy and passion, and we're certainly looking forward to working with you all.
All right, let's jump into the next section on sustainable freight plan updates and implementation. As I mentioned, we've got an interagency group that's going to present this to us. So I think we are going to Andre Freeman from CARB first. I believe. Are you there, Andre?
Yep, I'm here.
All right, take it away.
Great, thanks. So, we've talked about a lot about how big of a portion that freight is to California's economy, and recognizing that diesel pollution generated by the transportation sector and cargo transported throughout the state is still the biggest contributor to air toxics, criteria pollutants, and ozone that affects everybody's life. California has taken major steps through the Sustainable Freight Action Plan and subsequent actions to establish a sustainable freight system that's powered by equipment utilizing zero-emission technologies that are everywhere feasible, and near-zero emission technology with renewable fuels everywhere else. This chart shows the new actions that are being considered by the California Air Resources Board between 2018 and 2022 that will go towards minimizing the health impacts that freight facilities have on communities throughout the states. These actions will accelerate the transition to cleaner freight vehicles and equipment statewide, as well as establish the necessary infrastructure to support the rollout of these technologies. Through ongoing partnerships with communities, industry, public health advocates, and others, California will continue making progress on our air quality, public health, climate, and carbon neutrality goals. And momentarily, you'll hear from the California Energy Commission, who can talk a little bit more about the zero-emission infrastructure activities that are going on to support some of these regulations that you see here. So, Michelle, if you'd like to take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Michelle Bader. I'm with the California Energy Commission's Fuels and Transportation Division. I'm the supervisor overseeing the freight and transit unit. Our unit focuses primarily on administering grants designed to increase infrastructure to support advancing zero-emission vehicle technology within the freight and transit sectors in California. We receive annual funding from the Clean Transportation Program to accomplish this. At this time, with help from other units and divisions of the Energy Commission, we're developing 7 grant funding opportunities for medium and heavy-duty ZEV infrastructure projects that will award just over $50 million over the next year. Very exciting times. So to touch upon some of the recent events and workshops that have taken place with the Energy Commission and the Fuels and Transportation Division, on May 20th, the Energy Commission held an Integrated Energy Policy Report workshop, what we refer to as an IPER workshop, on heavy-duty ZEV market trends. Our session 1 focused on enhancing community equity with ZEVs in ports, and a panel discussion for increasing ZEV usage in ports and off-road activities. Community stakeholders, port facilities, off-road equipment manufacturers, and state agencies participated. Session 2 that afternoon focused on increasing the use of ZEVs for moving goods on roadways and included panelists from logistics companies, ZEV manufacturers, and managers of medium and heavy-duty transportation. More recently, on June 22nd and 24th, the Energy Commission hosted an IPER joint agency workshop along with the California Public Utilities Commission on vehicle grid integration. Session 1 of that workshop focused on an assessment of the current status of electric vehicle charging and VGI, and featured a discussion on the development of the 2020 VGI roadmap update and a panel discussion of potential benefits and opportunities for VGI. Additionally, the Energy Commission has a new website for the agency's biennial charging infrastructure assessment under AB 2127. This new website includes background, links to related proceedings, and relevant workshops. Plans are underway for an electric vehicle charging infrastructure workshop with sessions tentatively set for August 4th and August 6th. I'm really excited to mention that the Energy Commission and CARB have an upcoming grant funding opportunity for a zero-emission drayage truck and infrastructure pilot project. Currently, the agencies are drafting a joint solicitation to award up to $40 million in funds for projects that will support large-scale deployments of zero-emission Class 8 trucks and the necessary zero-emission vehicle fueling infrastructure needed for drayage or regional haul service. CARB will fund the Class 8 vehicles, and the Energy Commission will fund the fueling infrastructure, workforce development, and administrative costs. We're anticipating releasing the solicitation in late July and early August. And lastly, the Energy Commission just released a medium-duty, heavy-duty zero-emission vehicle blueprint funding opportunity. This planning blueprint solicitation has $3 million in funds available to award multiple projects that will identify electric charging and or hydrogen refueling requirements for medium and heavy-duty vehicles in California. This grant funding opportunity was just released yesterday, and we'll be hosting a pre-application workshop on July 28th at 10 a.m. Just lastly, I encourage you to sign up for our Energy Commission listservers if you're not already, just so you can be kept up to date on our agency information, our upcoming workshops, and are notified when our many new grant funding opportunities are released. That's it for the Energy Commission.
Impressive multitasking, Michelle. Thank you for that update. I'll pass it to Eric Frederick next to update from Caltrans.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I think it's timely. I just saw a cargo bike go past my house, so we're making real progress here in the freight world. Advanced Technology Corridors at Border Ports of Entry pilot project. That's one of the two pilot projects that were named for Caltrans for the lead from the Sustainable Freight Action Plan. So this project received $82.5 million through the California Transportation Commission for Cycle 1 of the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program for border projects at the California-Mexico border. And this funded phases 1 and 2 of the pilot project. And this includes the southbound border wait time system at all land ports of entry that have passenger and commercial vehicle crossings. It funded Phase 1 Imperial County Intelligent Transportation System elements. And one of the successes from the pilot project when we released the blueprint for the plan, we were able to get 15 air quality monitors as part of that, focused at Otay Mesa Port of Entry. It's modeled after what's going on at the San Isidro Port of Entry. And this was a direct result from a consortium of nonprofits wanted to meet with us after we put out the work plan, and they were added into the TSEP application. And so we'll be able to monitor the impacts of these sustainable freight efforts as they're implemented. And we're also coordinating with the San Isidro Border Wait Times pilot. And you can go on the Caltrans Quick Maps site to be able to see live border wait times there. As far as the other pilot project is Advanced Technology for Truck Corridors. This is the pilot that's focused basically from the San Pedro ports out to Nevada, Arizona on the I-10, I-15 corridors. So one exciting note about that, the Federal Highway Administration awarded the I-10 Coalition, which is a coalition between TxDOT and New Mexico DOT, Arizona DOT, and Caltrans. And they've awarded us $6.85 million for a truck parking availability system. And all the states are matching that with their time and other contributions. So the planning and development efforts are underway for that project. Our pilot project also talked about Freightus, which is Freight ITS projects essentially. there's an offshoot from the original Freightis project that LA Metro is leading called the Drayage Freight and Logistics Exchange, branded as DrayFlex. The platform's underway. It's really cool if you get a chance to see some of the early work on that, and it aims to provide freight-specific dynamic travel planning and helps improve container movement in and around the ports. And our statewide truck parking study, I have some breaking news. Our contract was awarded just yesterday afternoon. So Cambridge Systematics was awarded the contract, and we'll be starting in the next few days, hopefully, on that. And the study is going to identify unmet demand for truck parking statewide on key freight corridors and strategies to meet the demand, among several other initiatives. One of them is a very innovative, we hope, truck parking demand model that we don't think has been done before to the level that we're looking at. So we're pretty excited about tackling that. The Sustainable Freight Action Plan mentioned several rail-focused strategies that a lot of them are being led by our Caltrans division of Rail and Mass Transportation, including the California State Rail Plan 2022 that is it's initiated and will be completed in early 2022 as a target. The next update is going to build on the last plan to further develop and define the focused areas for strategy for rail freight identified in the last plan. An important first step for this part of the update includes a short line implementation plan, which was one of the Sustainable Freight Action Plan commitments. So right now, Rail Mass Transit is working with DB and Jacobs through a task order to develop the plan. The goal of the plan is to develop and further develop needs and opportunities and establish justification for the upcoming 2022 plan to further rail freight investment. The intent for the plan is an action-driven project to advance priorities, including developing a strategy to advance the short-line rails industry for California, encourage track upgrades, improve industrial rail access, advance technologies, encourage and look into cleaner energy solutions, improve efficiencies, and promote a cost-effective shift from truck to rail. So we're looking to have a draft report by the end of April 2021 and the final report by the end of June 2021. It's important to note that the schedule is aligned with the development of this next rail plan. It will form the next rail plan. We've established a fairly comprehensive stakeholder list, including short line carriers. But if anyone is interested, if you please reach out to one of us. Joshua Pulverman of DRMT is the lead, so you can also contact him. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. So last but not least, we've got Frank Ramirez from GoBiz to give us an update. Are you there, Frank?
I am. Thank you. Appreciate it. GoBiz is responsible for primarily two actions in the Sustainable Freight Action Plan, and Action 6 and Action 8. Action 8 is what I'm going to be talking about today briefly. It deals with workforce development as we move into the sustainable freight economy. What are the key issues revolving around workforce development? What we've done with the guidance of Tom O'Brien from CSU Long Beach and the funding from the CEC, the Energy Commission, we've developed a pilot project. It's called the California Sustainable Freight Foundation's Certificate for Middle Managers, and basically that's a certificate that's going to start at the 31st of July, and it's a series of coursework that's going to be offered. And we went out to get the folks interested. We actually had 51 folks that were interested in taking the course. 21 were from the private sector, and about 30 from the public sector. We ultimately ended up selecting 11 participants, but we have added some auditors, or not so much auditors, but evaluators and folks participating that can help us evaluate the project. So we'll have about 20 participants total. We had a variety of different folks interested. There was a lot of interest with 51 applicants, and they span about 24 of them were from Southern California, 9 of them from Sacramento. And then we had some interest from Washington, D.C., New Orleans, Seattle, Las Vegas. So then this pilot project for workforce development training generated a lot of good interest. And by the way, there is a handout attached to some of your materials, or at least you can go online and get that. And basically, the certificate content, the curriculum, is going to talk about current issues in freight systems and management. It's going to go over an introduction to energy, infrastructure, and sustainability. There's going to be a class on introduction to regulatory compliance in the freight world, and we're going to also have an introduction to data and metrics, and then another course on introduction to digital skills building, basically around IT and in its operations. And then we're going to have another discussion and coursework on legal issues in freight management. And then finally, the participants are going to have a capstone project, which will be about a 10-hour project, which is they're going to address topics identified in the industry critical to sustainable freight. So again, we're going to have 11 participants from the private and public sector going through this coursework. At the end of the session, well, what we hope to achieve here is to have these folks do one or two things. One is make their jobs easier and better and more sustainable in the freight world, but also help them move up in the world, and so they can achieve higher success as they move up to higher positions. Again, we're focusing on middle managers to start with, and we arrived at this through a variety of surveys that we did, and also working with our workforce development working group through the Sustainable Freight Action Plan, and so we're very excited about this. And again, you can read more about it. I won't go into any more detail, but you can read about it in the handout that I've established. And what we want to do with this at the end of the day is learn from it, get input from our evaluators, and then fashion more projects like this at other levels of the industry. Again, we focused on middle managers, but you can go into other facets and other focuses of workers within the freight industry, and we're hoping to move forward on this and perhaps take this pilot project and maybe transfer it on to other segments of the economy, other industries as well. So I want to thank the Energy Commission for its funding and Tom and Brian for its leadership. We're looking forward to the summer-long worth of learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank. Sounds like a really exciting project, and thank you to all of our interagency partners and also to Eric for these updates. There's a whole lot of exciting work being done in this sustainable freight area. So I want to see if we have questions to ask for looks like we've got 5 or so minutes still for this item. So do we have questions in the Q&A or people that want to ask questions?
Hi, Jeannie. We don't have any hands raised except for Frank. I think that might be a mistake. And then there's no questions in the question box.
Frank, did you have a question from earlier, or did you have something you wanted to add? I see your hand up.
No, I had raised my hand up on the CFMP, but you can ignore it at this point. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Sorry we missed it earlier. Just give folks one more minute in case there are any questions. On this item.
There are no questions. Eileen is asking if we can get access to the presentations, and yes, we will have these presentations posted within 2 weeks on our website.
Yeah, thanks, Eileen, for that clarification. We will post the presentations. All right, well, let's stay ahead of schedule. I'm getting some background noise, so I think we've got to get folks on, everyone on mute. Please mute your line if you're not muted. All right, next up we've got Scott Sauer from our Division of Transportation Planning, who's going to talk about the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan next.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am here and unmuted. Hello, everyone.
Okay, take it away.
Thank you. My name is Scott Sauer. I'm the Office Chief of Multimodal System Planning. My office is the lead for the development of the ITSP, the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan. And also on the line is Frances Diaz-Sanchez. She is the Program Manager for developing this plan. Next slide, please. The ITSP is a Caltrans planning document that provides guidance for the identification and prioritization of interregional transportation projects on the state's interregional transportation system to support the movement of people, vehicles, and goods. Per Government Code Section 14524.4, the plan shall be action-oriented and pragmatic, considering both the short-term and long-term future, and shall present clear, concise policy guidance to the Department for managing the state's transportation system. The ITSP guides the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program funding, the ITIP, towards intercity rail corridors and a subset of routes identified in California's legislatively designated interregional road system. Next slide, please. These are two maps from the 2015 ITSP, and these are our strategic interregional corridors. That's the one on the left, and the priority interregional facilities from the current plan, and those are the ones on the right. The strategic interregional corridors are the major interregional connections between regions. It's the major travel patterns between the major regions within the state. And the priority interregional facilities are the key railway and highway facilities within the corridors that support interregional travel. These are the backbone of our system linking the different regions. So next slide, please. The ITSP will adopt the California Transportation Plan 2050 goals to ensure alignment between the plans, and we will implement the CTP by looking at the interregional portion of that plan and provide further guidance and direction for it. The 2021 ITSP will evaluate how the ITSP will support interregional movement of goods in relation to the CTP and the California Freight Mobility Plan, the type of interregional transportation project outcomes that are needed to meet the state's climate and greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, and will shift to a more diversified portfolio of improvements to support the interregional movement of people and goods in a sustainable and equitable manner in collaboration with our district and regional transportation partners. As you can see, the ITSP and the California Freight Mobility Plan and the Sustainable Freight Action Plan are linked and supported by the ITSP. Basically, this is one of the avenues of implementing the CFMP and the CFAP. The ITSP update will evaluate the types of interregional transportation project outcomes that not only implement the CTP, the California Freight Mobility Plan, and the California State Rail Plan, but will work towards improving interregional travel in a more equitable manner in order to achieve equity goals in the CTP. The following are some of the plan elements. The ITSP is supportive of clean technology and the transition to zero-emission vehicles, both freight and passenger vehicles. It recognizes the importance of ZEV infrastructure to support the use of clean vehicles, supports affordable interregional travel trips made on interregional rail and interregional passenger bus services, and identifies how the ITSP can help implement the California Integrated Travel Project, CAL-ITP, which will develop seamless travel connections within the regional transit network to interregional trips at multimodal transit stations. Next slide, please. ITSP discusses many different elements, and this is just one example, and this was highlighted in the last slide, zero emission vehicle coordination. So the map shows the California alternate fuel corridors, which is an important element of the interregional system and will be used during the corridor analysis and to identify future system improvement needs. So there's a lot of different elements we look at to balance the movement in. And ZEV, how it impacts GHG and how it affects travel is one of those many things that we'll use in not only the analysis, but as we identify projects and improvements to support the system. So the next slide, please. So implementation. As stated previously, the ITSP implements the California Transportation Plan and works closely with both freight planning and rail planning branches of Caltrans to ensure consistency within the Freight Mobility Plan and the California State Rail Plan. All projects in the ITIP must be included in the regional transportation plans in order to be programmed. Thus, they are modeled for conformity purposes in the RTPs. So the ITSP is a long-range policy planning document that has traditionally informed the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program, which is reflected in the STIP guidelines. The STIP guidelines are updated by the California Transportation Commission, and they hold regular public meetings for the updates. And the project requesting to be programmed in the ITIP must meet the project selection criteria within the ITSP. Currently in Chapter 5 of the ITSP, we have a list of selection criteria that we use to decide on projects, and we'll update that as we move forward in this plan, and it will be linked to the CTP goals to better reflect what we're looking at in 2020 compared to 2015. The ITSP is further implemented through other planning activities. So system planning guidance is developed by headquarters on corridor planning process and how to do district system management plans. And it's provided to the districts, and partner agencies can use it. And it's executed by districts and the partner agencies through corridor plans. Many of these plans will have more specificity on the types of projects needed to improve the corridor and integrate land use planning to meet statewide greenhouse gas goals. They will identify projects to help achieve Senate Bill 375 and regional transportation plan modeling. Senate Bill 743 analysis done at the district level through other planning documents, but will probably be impacting the types of projects we look at and select for the ITIP. And then other non-ITIP funding opportunities are identified in the ITSP with an emphasis on matching up other funds or programs. Although this is, as we said, the ITIP document that does ITIP, we can't really fund projects anymore with just one fund source. So really you have to coordinate with a lot of different fund sources, as all of you know. That'll be part of not only the ITIP, but these corridor planning efforts. Next slide, please. And the schedule. So this is a very simple overview of schedule. Currently, we're internally working on reviewing the 2015 ITSP, updating the information on the corridors. We're running through our statewide travel demand model to get new information, new updates to make it more reflective of 2020. We will have our website for the ITSP up soon that will include a survey for all of our internal external partners to provide input on interregional travel and be linked to the CTP 2050 workshops. We obviously would like to go out and meet everybody, but with the COVID situation, we'll be doing a lot of it electronically. Public and stakeholder workshops will be held in fall of 2020 across the state, with a draft plan expected to be released in December. Our goal is to have the plan done by March of 2021 to provide guidance on the 2022 ITIP. For any of you, different agencies or groups, if you want us to give us input, you'll see our email later. But if you want us to speak or present at any meetings that you have, we'd be more than happy to do that to get your input. We'd rather go to your place than have you come to us if need be, but that would be helpful. Next slide, please. And this is the last one. This is the contact information. Francis Diaz Sanchez is the project manager for the ITSP. So she's handling, and she worked on the 2015 ITSP in the last version. And as this is contact information for me. So if you have any questions right now, that would be great. If not, feel free to email us and give that information to us, and we'll get back to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Scott. You've got a noisy coworker, it sounds like, in the background there.
Actually, that's not me, and I was trying not to laugh the whole time. So thank you.
Oh, it wasn't you.
No,
it sounds like somebody has a kitten. I have to say, one of the most endearing things about working from home is hearing people's pets and children in the background. It's a bit of a distraction, but it's also really it adds some entertainment and levity to our meeting.
Yeah, luckily you didn't see me having to wave off my 8-year-old that tried to come into the room. So thank you.
Well, childcare certainly adds big challenges. So my sympathy to those that are trying to do double duty with childcare as well while working. Thank you so much, Scott, for the presentation. Let's take questions for Scott on the ITSP. This is, I'll just reinforce this, Jeannie, again, that, this is an incredibly important plan for us at Caltrans, and, being the lead on managing interregional travel, and it's certainly a key priority area for freight movement. So we'd love to engage you all in developing this plan update and get any questions or input you have at this point.
So, Jeannie,
Karen, do we have any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, we have a question from Rob Ball from Kern Cog. The priority corridor maps are missing I-40. Will you update those maps to include this highest volume truck route leaving the state?
We definitely will consider. I know 40 is definitely a route that I think we debated on last time, and it had a lot of pros and cons, a lot of pros for it. We are definitely going to reconsider. We'll reconsider other routes that are throughout the state, but we have to kind of balance the size and scope of it. We can definitely put it within the I think it's within the strategic interregional corridor analysis and discussion. If it rises up to be a priority interregional facility, we'll just have to let we'll analyze the data, and we'll look at the options, and we'll look kind of at our plans. But it's definitely going to be something we consider.
Thank you, Scott. And cool. Thank you, Robert, for the question. Is there another question?
There are no more questions right now.
Great. I thought I heard somebody trying to chime in there. All right. So it looks like we're a little bit ahead of schedule. We were going to take our break next. I know how hard it can be to engage with this virtual format for too long. So let's go ahead and take the break. I think, Yatman, is that, should we go and give people the break until 10:35, or should we try to come back a little early?
Yeah, hi Jeannie. Yes, let's come back at 10:35. I think that will give us on a better pace. Especially for the presenters coming up.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Since we've got these items are scheduled, then we will give you almost a half-hour break to give you time to catch up on other work. All right, thank you all. Let's come back at 10:35.
I think we're going to jump back in. It looks like we've still got a number of people on the line, so thank you all for hanging with us. The second half of our agenda is a little bit shorter, so hopefully we can keep you engaged. So our next item is on SB 743. I know this is an issue that is very hot right now. We're sort of deep in the middle of implementation. So it's a really important item to us at Caltrans, and we've been doing a ton of work and lots of discussion with partners. So
really glad to bring this item to you all and engage. And we've got Zongren Wang and Mug Stoll, who are key parts of our implementation team at Caltrans. And I will pass it to them to give this presentation.
Hey, Jeannie, this is Mug Stoll, and I think I'm going to take the lead on this very brief presentation on 743. And I have to say, I'm a retired annuitant after over 30 years working for Caltrans, mainly in District 11, and then also 12 years at Sandag. And so I came back earlier this year to help with the implementation of 743. I'm an empty nester. Both my boys have grown and gone. We have no pets, so I don't know that I'll have any of the fun background noises while I'm making my presentation. So I'll try and make it entertaining in other ways, I suppose. Zongren Wang is our program manager for the SB 743 implementation, and he's on today as well. And we're both here for any discussion or questions that we have that you all may have on this topic. And I say it's a very short update on this program. And the reason I say that is because the focus of SB 743 thus far, and I'll get into this a little bit, is really focused on passenger vehicles. It's not focused on heavy vehicles or trucks or freight. And so in terms of the work that we've been doing, putting together the guidance documents, we really have been focusing on that. So if I could get the next slide, please. Just put a couple of excerpts on this slide to let you know. That section there is actually from the CEQA guidelines that were published in late 2018, and just noting that the vehicle miles traveled that is being used for SB 743 analysis refers to the amount and distance of automobile travel attributable to the project, and emphasis on the word automobile. And OPR, Office of Planning and Research, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, they put out a technical advisory in late 2018, and there's an excerpt there from that technical advisory that says, automobile refers to on-road passenger vehicles, specifically cars and light trucks. And then they go on to say heavy-duty truck VMT could be included for modeling convenience and ease of calculation. And the reason they put that in there is because, some models literally, when they predict traffic volumes, the trucks, they don't separate trucks out, and so there's a total traffic volume, including trucks within there. And basically, OPR was acknowledging that you don't have to pull that out, but you could if you wanted to as part of your analysis. Anyway, the next slide, please. In terms of the transportation analysis work that we're doing now, we've just published the guidance on land use projects that was published and went into full effect on July 1st. But currently, we're working very hard on our guidance documents for projects on the state highway system, the transportation analysis framework and the transportation analysis under CEQA, the TAF and the TAC. And the TAP is really focused on the VMT analysis itself and the measurement of induced travel as part of that VMT analysis. And the TAC is more focused on, the CEQA process itself for projects. And wanted to note that as we're working on finalizing that guidance for the September 15th deadline date, that we intend to include a case study, a couple of case studies, but one of them would specifically be for a truck climbing lane project in a rural area, because we had some questions about that. And then, of course, although SB 743 is very focused on transportation analysis and the use of VMT versus level of service as part of that analysis, it doesn't change all of the other non-transportation CEQA issues that need to be dealt with in the analysis that's done on projects, aesthetics, biological resources, agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. We probably should have said et cetera after that. There's a lot of other studies that will continue to need to be done. So if we can go to the next slide, I wanted to just kind of give a flavor of the type of comments. We had the TAP and the TAC documents out for review for 60 days, and the comment period closed back in June, and we're working very hard to review and respond to all of the various comments we received, and actually kind of putting those comments into themes and incorporating them into the final documents that we're working on. So we pulled out some of the comments that we received in the process that were focused on freight issues, and the first three are pretty straightforward. The asking to clarify whether the induced travel methodology includes freight, and whether truck VMT is included in the VMT calculation for general purpose lanes. As I mentioned before, the answer to those two questions is it could. It depends on the model that you're using and whether there's a desire to pull the truck traffic out of that or to keep it within it. It doesn't have to be part of the analysis on those. The third comment or general comment we got there was the specifically asking about the truck climbing lane, and I mentioned that we're going to be including a case study in the final guidance documents to address that. The next comment there really focuses in on goods movement projects on the state highway system, particularly those that may be part of an existing sales tax measure and how those are going to be affected. And I think the last bullet that you see there, comments that talk about whether or how truck-generated VMT for industrial and other projects should be addressed. I think that last bullet applied to a lot of, freight support facilities like distribution facilities and so forth. And these are two issues that because we've been so focused on passenger vehicle analysis, because that's what where the guidance has pushed us. As we get that guidance out, we really do want to follow up on some freight-related issues on 743, because implementing 743 is going to be a learning process. We put the guidance out in September. We're going to learn things about projects, and it's going to have to evolve. And one of the areas that we want to spend some time looking is specifically things like, when you define or you do a project purpose and need, and that definition includes the facilitation of goods movement and freight. That's important to define what that is and define how much of the project that does. On the other hand, if transportation improvements are done with a primary purpose of addressing freight issues, and yet there is an increase in passenger vehicle VMT as part of the project, well, that needs to be evaluated too. So how we go about doing that is some things that we think are fruitful for some follow-up with some of our stakeholders. So if we go to the next slide, this is really where we wanted to leave it today, and to see if we could get some feedback as we do move forward and put some more effort into the freight side of SB 743. Just wondering what this group might see as additional issues that related to freight or goods movement that need to be addressed on SB 743, and if there's any additional guidance that would be helpful, relative to these particular issues, because we really do look forward to working with the freight community on how we evolve the implementation of this new law, because it's a very new way of doing things, as you all know. And as I mentioned, we consider this a learning process as we go forward. It's once we come out with the guidance, it's not like those are going to be chiseled in stone and we'll never make changes to them. So we're here today to hear any ideas that some of you have. If you have questions, we may have some brief answers. We may not. We may want to just catalog those for follow-up after this. So with that, I'll ask Zongren if he has any other comments he wants to add. Otherwise, I'd like to open it up for any questions or discussion from the folks on the committee.
Thank you, Mark. I just want to open it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Muggs and Zongren both. Appreciate the this presentation, and this is a key issue. So let's go to Q&A. Feel free to put your hand up or put a question in the Q&A box or comment, of course. Do we have any questions or comments?
So there's no hands raised at the moment, and there are no questions pertaining to this presentation right now.
All right, thanks, Karen. I will just add, this is Jeannie again. Oh, I see some questions coming.
I see a question, sorry.
Before we get to the questions, I just wanted to add a quick note. This is Jeannie Wardwaller again. We are working very closely with our interagency partners on this effort, and certainly Governor's Office of Planning and Research, OPR, has been really the lead on the land use side, and I know there are concerns, issues that relate both to land use and transportation projects with this implementation of 743. So it would be helpful, for you to provide questions on either of those. And we can discuss with OPR if we need to bring them to a future meeting. We can think about that too. We certainly want to engage your input and questions and concerns on this issue. All right, let's go to questions. I see a couple popping up.
All right, so the first question I have is from Steve Smith here from San Bernardino County Transportation Authority. Given the last mile freight issues and the impact of trucks on local interchanges, would it be possible within Caltrans' discretion to screen out interchange reconstruction projects so that they don't get thrown into EIRs and further delay projects?
Mark, do you want to try it?
Sure. We've received some feedback as part of the circulation of the TAP and the TAC on various types of projects, and not just the idea of interchanges and how to treat interchange improvement projects isn't just related to freight in some of those comments. And I think the issue is that again, looking at you'd have to do the analysis of the specific project to determine if the interchange project is actually resulting in increased DMT for passenger vehicles or not. And so to the extent that the improvements to the interchange are really there to operationally handle freight, traffic, etc., that definitely could come out as part of the analysis, and the level of any sort of mitigation or anything for the increased DMT would be affected by how much is there. So I certainly think it's worth looking into what the freight component is of and how much that is affecting the design of the interchange project. And I don't know, Zongren, if you had anything else.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. In fact, 2 points I want to make will be, additional to whatever Marks have talked about. One will be that Governor's Office of Planning and Research, they owns the screen out project list. So like, the question about, interchange type of projects, I do not think that one is on the list as a screen out, right? So when a project got screened out, that means its VMT impact is either insubstantial or not measurable, right? So I think Mark's already kind of make it very clear that, in our guidance, we want everything to be analysis driven. So especially in terms of VMT analysis. So let the project to speak for itself. It's not really a subjective thing. And I think, yes, the ISP 743 changed a little bit of the CFAC process, but, most of the projects say if you involve an interchange, I think you will have to go through like the CFAC process, right? So, and then the schedule should already be somehow considered in the process. Thank you.
All right. Our next question is from Casey Emoto from Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority. Is VMT analysis required for projects involving non-mainline lanes, such as truck lanes or aux lanes?
This is Muggs. Thanks for the question. And both truck lanes and auxiliary lanes are addressed in the screen, as Zongren mentioned, the list of projects that can be screened out of analysis that's on the Governor's Office of Planning and Research Technical Advisory, which is on their website, very easy to find, and the list was also included in the draft of the TAC that we circulated as well. And so there are certain provisions. The way it's currently written, I believe, on auxiliary lanes for operational improvements that are a mile or less would be screened out. We've been getting some comments about that in terms of, is that mile absolute or not? And so we're going to be looking into that in terms of, it really goes back to the project's purpose and need. If the purpose and need of the project is truly operational and not capacity increasing, then I think that analysis and the project's purpose and need could be put together to make the case for potentially screening a project like that out. Truck climbing lanes, very similar circumstance. If the truck climbing lane is there specifically for operational and or safety issues and does not result in increased VMT being accommodated from, and that's not the focus of the project, and the analysis shows that, that's another project that could potentially be screened out of the analysis.
All right. So the next question is from Laurel from RCTC. Can you tell us more about the case study?
Zongren, you want to talk
Yeah,
about
I can chime in that. Yeah, I can chime in on that. We have in the current TAF and TAC, we have like 2 case studies prepared. One is on the HOV lanes, and the other one is on the truck climbing lane in a rural setting, right? So basically, it just shows, how the entire screening process might work for the truck climbing lane, and what kind of other factors you have to consider, go through the entire CFAC process. So we already have the draft version now in the interagency team for review. And I think very soon, I think your folks might be able to see, the full version of the little case study there. So in my, I think one time in the half webinar we delivered on May 11th, we also have mentioned the case study. So please refer to the online video. And if you can visit our ISP 743 website, I think you just Google it, ISP 743 implementation and Caltrans. I think you are going to find the two YouTube videos there. Thank you.
All right. The last question we have here is from Teresa from the Port of Long Beach. Will there be working group to discuss SB 743 and freight issues? And additionally, she says, for ports, we generate both passenger vehicle trips as well as freight trips. However, traditional mitigation measures to address VMT-related impacts may not be applicable/feasible.
So I think just to be clear, the first part was, will there be a working group to focus on this issue? And then the second was a comment about the fact that there is both passenger vehicles and trucks, and that traditional mitigation may not be applicable at the ports.
Yes.
Did I get that right? Okay,
yeah, that's right.
I just want to make sure I heard that. At this point, don't know that we have specifically planned to establish a working group, but I think if that's something that some of the folks on this call think would be of use, we could certainly consider that, or we could, call a meeting together and all interested parties could be a part of it. But that's something that we could certainly consider, because we are looking into some of these issues following up. So we appreciate that idea. And I think, there's no doubt that freight facilities, whether they're a port, whether they're distribution centers or whatever, they all have a mix of traffic within any VMT analysis is likely to look at. There's just a lot of activity around those kinds of centers, and so the analysis when you do the analysis, you need to look at what kinds of VMT are going to be there, and there are a host of different mitigation strategies that are available. And you're right, the reason why we have, if you go on our website, there's a lot of different mitigation concepts that can be considered. There are a number of them because they won't apply to every project, and in places like the major ports, they're very unique, and there's going to be some mitigation measures that won't work at all, and others that may be helpful to try and minimize the use of single occupant vehicles in and around the facility. So anyway, appreciate the comment, and we'll look into the method by which we engage the stakeholder community to follow up on these issues.
Thank you so much, Muggs and Zongren. Just to chime in on that last suggestion, it might be helpful if we have this item on our CFAC agendas in the future. In lieu of a working group, we can certainly have some discussion with the 743 team about the need for a working group and whether that would add value. But I think we can certainly commit to continue to keep this item on our agenda for CFAC. For the upcoming meetings to continue this discussion, because I think it is a very technical, very complex, and also super important topic. So it looks like Zongren's shared some resources in the Q&A box, so we'll make sure to share those out as well. So we still have a couple minutes before our next item. Just give folks one last chance to make a comment or ask a question while we've got Zongren and Muggs here. And Yatman is reminding me that you're also welcome to send your comments and questions to the CFAC email, which I believe is cfac@dot.ca.gov. If you have more questions and follow up, we can make sure to get them answered. All right. It looks like I don't see any other questions. Karen, am I missing any?
Nope, there are no more questions.
All right. Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.
Joining us. Really appreciate it. Okay, our next item on the agenda is discussion on the CFAC charter, and Yatman is going to lead us on this item. I'll pass it to you, Yatman.
Thank you, Jeannie. I appreciate it. Have the next slide, Allison, please. So, good morning, everyone. Before I start, I really want to echo what Monica had mentioned earlier and appreciate CFAC's continuous effort on the CFMP. It's been definitely a very, very fulfilling experience, and I definitely look forward to providing and moving towards the implementation of the CFMP. So, with that said, again, as we're moving towards the implementation and other free activities we're working on, we are proposing 3 amendments to the CFAC charter. This is really to ensure to continue our engagement as appropriate. So, Allison, next slide, please. So, for the first amendment, we're proposing to have the nomination power of the committee members delegated from the Caltrans director to the deputy director of planning and model programs. So, currently, as it stands, it's from Director Elmashakin to Jeannie. And the purpose of this change is to really speed up the nomination process and keep the membership more engaged and up to date, especially since we have such an array of actions to implement the CFMP. We really want to ensure that we have the right groups of stakeholders represented, as well as providing the right conduits to have our information disseminated to CFAC members. If we move to the next slide, please. For the amendment number 2, this is similar to the first amendment, and we will continue to seek, as we continue to seek CFAC's input for state freight activities, we really appreciate the participation from CFAC. So as such, we're proposing to remove members or alternates if they do not attend 5 consecutive meetings, and after 3 consecutive absences, we will send out a reminder for participation. And again, this is really to ensure that we have a really solid engagement with our CFAC members, especially as we're looking for your advice to navigate our implementation strategies and as well as other freight efforts across the state. And lastly, Allison. And lastly, we want to ensure our engagement activities have sufficient progress before we really seek your input. So, as such, rather than fixated having quarterly meetings, we would like to hold these meetings when necessary, but at least a minimum of 2 meetings a year to ensure that we can proactively and engage the CFAC members as we're progressing towards implementation, as well as seeking your advice for other inputs you may have for the overall state freight activity as well. Please do note that this does not impact any subcommittees or any other efforts that are outside of formal CFAC member meetings, and this is more of having a method or procedure where if we need to have CFAC meetings at a closer interval or maybe further intervals, that we have them in an appropriate time. So my presentation is pretty easy, pretty quick. So next slide, please, Allison. So if there's any questions, comments. Kieran, is there anything?
Yeah, so we have a hand raised from Marnie Primer. Marnie, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Good morning, Marnie.
Hi, Yatman. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Hey, so I just wanted to give my thoughts on the proposed changes. I think delegating down from the director to really the person who is moderating the committee makes sense. And so I would support that change. The next 2 I have issues with. So for the first one, 5 meetings in a row at our current frequency would be someone who hasn't attended in over a year. And if you move to a 2 meeting per year frequency, then that's someone who hasn't attended essentially in 2.5 years. I think that, if they're not going to be engaged, a 3 meeting absence in a row is a more appropriate duration. If you can't make it to 3 meetings in a row, then maybe this isn't as important as it should be. And with regards to changing the frequency, I think your point about giving the department more flexibility in terms of when we meet and timing the meetings so that they're something we can really sink our teeth into, I totally agree with that. But I'm questioning why we would go from 4 meetings to 2 meetings per year. Can we not keep the number of meetings, but then give the department the flexibility for when those meetings should take place?
Thank you, Marty. So for the amendment number 3, so Allison, we go back to the previous slide. So for the amendment number 3, this is to change the fixation on the quarterly. So we are going to have a minimum of 2 per year rather than just 2. Again, we want to maybe there are times we want to have 5. So we want to have that, having the right time to provide engagement with CFAC members. Again, I just want to emphasize that we're not proposing just 2, but quarterly. It's more fixated on the time rather than the frequency. However, no, I do appreciate your comment, and then let me. I'm open to other ideas as well. Regarding amendment number 2 previously, removal of members, that's noted, and we will consider your recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is Jeannie. Can I just jump in real quick? I'd love to invite folks to recommend additional amendments as well. I think those are great points by Marnie, and we really want you all as CFAC members to be engaged, to feel like this is a useful space. And so these are the amendments that Caltrans is bringing forward for consideration to things that we think would be useful to us to be able to continue to bring you really engaging agendas, but we'd love your suggestions, and maybe we can make sure that a version of the charter with suggested track changes on these amendments go out to the group and follow up to the meeting, and give you a chance to send comments and any additional suggestions in the follow-up. Does that make sense, Yatman?
Yes, absolutely. So so as a follow-up, we will send track changes. We look forward to the input. Is there any other questions, Karen?
There's no more questions, and Marnie, if you don't have anything else, you can unraise your hand. And there's no questions in the Q&A box.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I look forward to further engaging CFAC.
Thank you, Yatman. I do see a message in the chat from Bill McGavin that says, I support the amendments. They should improve CFAC participation. So thank you for that comment, Bill. And please do keep an eye out for the follow-up. And as I said, your engagement and implementation of this CFMP is really important. So we want to make sure this is a useful space going forward. I think also we'll send a survey and give you a chance for feedback after this meeting, so we can make sure that we can make the virtual format engaging as well. All right. Well, with that, we are definitely ahead of schedule, 10 minutes ahead, which is great. So we are going to go to our roundtable updates, and the first one is Tasha Clemens with FHWA. Are you there, Tasha?
Good morning. This is Monica Gordine. Actually, Tasha cannot make it today, so I'm going to be doing her report out. So she sends her apologies for not being able to attend, but I'll be doing it.
Thank you, Monica. Take it away.
Okay, great. Good morning. And I am actually the Associate Division Administrator with the California, Federal Highway California Division, and I am located in Southern California out of our Los Angeles location. So I guess many of you probably know that the FAST Act, which is our reauthorization bill, expires at the end of this fiscal year. And right now there's no word on reauthorization, but with that being said, our hope is that Congress will basically extend our current authorization bill until a new authorization is passed. And with regards to our program, the Highway Trust Fund, one of the issues around COVID and the virus is impacting our highway trust fund. And you may ask, how is that happening? Well, people are driving less. People are buying less trucks. They're buying less truck tires. They're buying less diesel fuel. And these are the tax revenues that we use to basically supply or fund the highway trust fund. So the expectation is that probably sometime in FY 2021, either at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, we will experience a cash flow problem, a cash shortfall essentially. And if that happens, then we will have to institute what we call a cash management plan. And our department is monitoring this situation. Hopefully that will not have to happen. But if it does happen, we'll have to essentially have a slowdown in cash outlay. So when we get the bills that come in, we'll have to slow down how we pay those bills until maybe the expectation is that Congress may provide an influx of funding from our general fund into the trust fund. But we will all have to wait and see what happens. So that's generally what's happening around the Highway Trust Fund for our department. Then in regards to, we have two grants that we typically do every year, our Build Grant and our Infra Grant. There was a notice of funding availability at the beginning of this year for the 2020 Build Discretionary Grant Program, and that's closed. And right now the department is reviewing those applications, and there's an expectation that we'll have the nominations this fall. So hopefully you'll hear about the Build nominations the fall of this year. In regards to infra grants, there were no nominations for California this year, so none of the projects that were submitted for California received funding this year. And the department is going to have a debriefing for all of the applications that were submitted in California. So the applicants should receive a callback, and when you receive that callback, you can request a debriefing. If not, there is a website called infragrant.org, and you can also request a debriefing on that website as well. Then finally, as one of the responsibilities here at Federal Highway, what we do is we do a freight assessment. And we just finished up our freight assessment for the state. And typically this freight assessment is conducted every 2 years, but Federal Highways has decided to go to a 4-year cycle. And the primary purpose of the freight assessment is to understand the freight program in California and across the nation. And it's a tool by which our headquarters develops tools and training mechanisms to see how they can help the freight program along through the states. And the expectation is once they collect all the freight assessments from all the states around the country, that they will publish a report at the end of this year. Now, in addition to the freight assessment, we also do an assessment of all the MPOs in California. And that MPO assessment, freight assessment, is supposed to happen next year, 2021. So we'll be reaching out to the MPOs to start that conversation about the MPO freight assessment next spring. And I think that's all I have, unless anyone has any questions.
There are no questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. Appreciate it. All right, our next update is from CTC, and I believe we have Hannah Walter with us. Are you there, Hannah?
Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
I'll give you, so my name is Hannah Walter. I'm the program manager for the Trade Quarter Enhancement Program at the Commission. I'll briefly touch on the 2018 program, give you some 2020 program dates and just main updates from the guidelines. And then I just have one question, and I can answer any questions that anyone has. So for the 2018 program, as of the June commission meeting, there was a little over 6% of the funds that had been allocated. There was a timely use of funds policy that the commission adopted in May to allow agencies additional time to request allocation for their trade corridor projects. So instead of having through June, they have through December of 2020 to request allocation. There are 13 projects that still need some kind of action, like an allocation request that we'll be working on with Caltrans and others between August and December to wrap up the 2018 program. So that's where things stand with that. That background noise is actually not coming from me. And then for the 2020 program,
Muted. Sorry about the background noise. If everyone could please mute. We're hearing some background noise. Sorry, Hannah. Please proceed.
Oh no, that's totally fine. I'm actually outside because everywhere in my house is noisy. So I hope it stays that way. Okay, so for the 2020 program, the guidelines were adopted in March. Applications are due August 3rd. We plan to release the staff recommendations in November and then adopt the program on December 2nd. Some of the new kind of policy direction that are in the 2020 guidelines, there's advanced funds for federal grants in addition to the infra grants. We said that other grants may be allowable if they're consistent with the intent of the program. Another new thing is if a project is requesting funds for the project approval and environmental document phase, it can't request funding for a different phase in the 2020 program, but it can. There's nothing that would prevent an agency from requesting funding for another phase in a future program cycle. Applicants now have to complete a performance metrics form so that we can just start to get a better handle on the program benefits. And we added a specific reference to public zero emissions infrastructure in the eligible project section of the guidelines. And that reference specifically excludes vehicles. So it's saying that zero emissions infrastructure is eligible. And that's pretty much my update. I have one question for the group, and that is that we wanted to establish a rail contact to make sure that we can coordinate with them about the potential impact of new rail projects. And I was wondering if there was a Union Pacific or a BNSF contact on the call that I can reach out to separately, just so that I can coordinate with them.
Thank you, Hannah. I do believe we have representatives on, or at least they were on earlier. So we can, unless someone wants to chime in, we Caltrans can help get you the right contacts.
Okay, that would be great. And so that's really my update, and I can answer any questions that anyone might have.
All right. Any questions for Hannah and the CTC? There are no questions in the Q&A box, and there's no hands raised. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you.
All right, our next update is from CalSTA, so we're going to pass it back to Avital Barnea for an update. Are you there, Avital?
Yes, am I unmuted? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, great, thank you. So I want to start out talking a little bit about the budget. We have a multi-year effort to address a current $54.3 billion state budget deficit. I know that Monica talked about the federal deficit, but we certainly have a deficit here in the state as well. But thankfully, we entered the COVID-19 crisis and the budget deficit from a pretty strong economic position, particularly for transportation funding. So while all budgets will be impacted by this crisis, the transportation budget is still pretty strong and remains about the same as it was in January. We're still collecting SB1 funds, and While they're down, the projection is that $5.5 billion will be generated in this budget year. And the forecast for fuel tax revenues has dropped by about $578 million. And that was in the current year, and then by another $670 million in the budget year. So altogether, fuel tax revenues are expected to drop by a total of $1.8 billion over the next 5 years. But there is some good news. As a state, we are in a stronger position than some other states to continue our progress, and we currently have cash balances within the state highway account to the tune of $2.2 billion, the public transportation account with $1.4 billion, and the road maintenance and rehabilitation account, which has more than $2.1 billion as of the end of the third quarter. And in fact, through the third fiscal quarter, the state highway account actually received 3% more revenues above the forecast, and the road maintenance and rehabilitation account revenues were 4% above the forecast. So that said, the road to recovery is still going to be long, and the federal government will help us play a significant role in recovering from the effects of COVID-19. To that end, at CalSTA, we support the HEROES Act, which was passed by the House in May and would provide $15 billion to state DOTs to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. And California's share of that $15 billion would be almost $1.4 billion. We're also supporting AASHTO's request to increase HEROES Act funding for state DOTs to $50 billion, which would provide California with almost $4.7 billion. Also regarding COVID-19, as I mentioned briefly in my presentation earlier this morning, CalSTA has been engaging our modal partners throughout the pandemic. In April, we started holding regular phone meetings with modal associations across the state, such as the California Association of Port Authorities, the California Trucking Association, the California Transit Association, the California Association for Coordinated Transportation, PMSA, and the California Retailers Association. And in addition, Secretary Kim was tapped by Governor Newsom to lead the California Transportation and Critical Infrastructure COVID-19 Task Force, which meets bi-weekly by phone and includes representatives from all of the relevant state agencies and departments, as well as the U.S. Department of Transportation. I also want to reiterate from my presentation that the DMV is recognizing motor carrier permits and commercial driver's licenses that expired in March 2020 or later to be valid through September 30th, and that is consistent with the federal emergency action. Shifting topics a little bit, as has been mentioned at previous CFAC meetings, on September 20th, 2019, Governor Newsom issued Executive Order N-1919, which calls for actions from multiple state agencies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and mitigate the impact of climate change. The EO includes a direct acknowledgement of the role the transportation sector must play in tackling climate change. And so to further the state's climate goals, the EO directs CalSTA to leverage discretionary state transportation funds to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector and adapt to climate change. So in order to implement the direction given in the EO, CalSTA is developing an action plan that provides a vision on how to prioritize future state transportation dollars, whether that be existing programs or future funding opportunities for economic and community resilience and recovery. We certainly acknowledge that since the release of the executive order, a lot has changed in California and across the world. We now find ourselves in a recession and a pandemic, both of which have significantly impacted transportation system needs and funding, and we are taking that into account as we develop the action plan. As far as the timeline, we're currently holding key stakeholder group meetings via teleconference and video conference to gather input and discuss specific issues for the action plan, and we will continue to conduct virtual public engagement through the fall. and we anticipate releasing a draft action plan for public comment this November. We're then planning to release the final action plan in February 2021. And lastly, building on what Jeannie mentioned at the beginning of this call, I'd like to acknowledge the recent issues that have raised our collective consciousness around systemic racism, injustice, and social equity, and the role that we can play as transportation leaders in correcting injustices that have disproportionately impacted Black communities and people of color for far too long. Several weeks ago, Secretary Kim released a public statement on racial equity, injustice, and inclusion in transportation, which says, among other things, that CalSTA strongly condemns systemic racism and discrimination in all forms, including those historically entrenched in transportation. This statement also points out that transportation decisions have literally divided communities and amplified racial inequalities, especially in Black and brown neighborhoods. Secretary Kim and all of us at CalSTA very much believe that racial equity, inclusion, and diversity are foundational to achieving our vision of a cleaner, safer, more accessible, and more connected transportation future for California. And so, going forward, CalSTA and our departments pledge to be part of the solution. We are going to promote policies and programs that reflect principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're going to work with stakeholders to identify areas for improvement. And that will include the CFAC. So I hope you'll take a moment to read the Secretary's statement if you haven't already. It's posted on CalSTA's website. And we very much welcome your input as we take steps to ensure that transportation systems are designed and delivered in a manner that will provide safe and equitable access to opportunity, particularly for people of color and disadvantaged communities, since that's the only way that we'll truly enhance quality of life. So thank you, that's all my updates.
Thank you so much, Avital, for all those updates from CalSTA. There's an incredible amount of work happening. Any questions or hands raised for CalSTA?
There are no questions for Avital.
All right. Thank you, Avital. All right, our last update is from Caltrans DOTP, Transportation Planning, and Marlon is going to come back in and provide this update.
Hey, great, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Background noise.
It sounds like somebody's on a jetway or something. Please ask everyone to mute their lines, and maybe our host can try to go through and mute folks that are unmuted.
So I think that the background noise was coming from Josh, but let me just...
So whoever is the host should be able to actually mute people directly. Maybe we should try that and then just unmute Marlon. You can mute all and then unmute Marlon.
Okay, I think we're good. All right. So I have 3 updates I want to give today. One's on the California Transportation Plan. The other is the Sustainable Transportation Planning Grants. And then my last update is on the SAFE rule. So in regards to the California Transportation Plan, we're currently reviewing our internal administrative draft. Looking forward to releasing that next month. One of the things of note, over the past couple of months, we've been really working hard to make the appropriate adjustments to the plan to account for impacts from COVID-19, including massive social, economic, and transportation shifts that have occurred. So we are putting the finishing touches on that. And we're working towards delivering the public draft around August 15th, shortly after presenting to the California Transportation Commission. The team is planning on 100% digital public participation, so this will include online workshops, surveys, and a short introductory video. that lays out, a good overview of the plan. And I think it's important to note that we're going to be sending, once the document is released, then we'll make sure that we send that out to our CFAC members because we really want to make sure that we're getting comments from this group. Next update is related to our fiscal year 21-22 Sustainable Transportation Grant Guide and applications. So we are in the process right now of updating our guide in consultation with state agencies and stakeholder input. The final draft guide will be released sometime in the summer for a 30-day formal public comment period, followed by 2 virtual public workshops to receive final input. And so similar to the CTP, we'll make sure that we email the information to the CFAC members to get comments on the grant guide. One of the things I want to point out is that the grant guide does specifically speak to implementation of our modal plans, including the Sustainable Freight Action Plan and the California Freight Mobility Plan. So, this is an important program that helps us implement various aspects of these plans. And there are grant program objectives that directly support freight. So we're really looking forward, once we're ready to release the final grant guide, to see more proposals related to planning for sustainable freight. So we can look forward to seeing the call for projects sometime by the end of the summer, with applications due in the fall, and then grant announcements will be announced in the spring of 2021. Then the last update is related to the SAFE Rule. So SAFE Rule Part 2 was signed on March the 31st, 2020, which rolls back the 2012 fuel efficiency standards. The rule was published in the Federal Register on May 1st, 2020, with an effective date of June 29, 2020. So that was recent. Couple of things I want to point out, that there were adjustment factors that were released by the Air Resources Board back in November of 2019. So that was applicable to the SAFE Rule Part 1. On June the 26th, 2020, CARB released a memo titled INFAC Off-Model Adjustment Factors for Carbon Dioxide Emissions to Account for the Safe Vehicle Rule Part 1 and the final rule, which is Part 2. And specifically, the memo states that the adjustment factors were only for criteria pollutants, and the US EPA considered them to be acceptable for use with transportation conformity determinations in California. And so, in other words, the carbon dioxide standards that were front and center as part of the SAFE Rule Part 2 do not impact federal air quality conformity standards, since CO2 is not considered a federal air quality criteria pollutant. So, so with that said, transportation conformity determination approval process will be continuing to move forward with the use of the current adjustment factors that were released by the Air Resources Board. So this applies to MFAC 2014 and 2017 models. And we've gotten reassurances from US EPA Region 9 and the FHWA California Division. So that concludes my comments, and I'll be happy to take any questions that anyone has.
All right. Thank you, Marlon. Any questions for Marlon?
Hi, Jeannie. I don't see any questions at the moment, and no one has raised their hands. So.
Okay. I think maybe we're getting virtual meeting fatigue here. We're almost to the end of our agenda. I think at this point we open it up to public comments.
Jeannie, sorry. I do have a comment from Rob Ball.
Okay.
If you want me to read it.
Please.
So SJVAPCD completed an inland port market study with the ports of LA and Long Beach. The study shows 8 to 9 container trains per week at 30% market saturation based on 2017 data. And then there's a link to the draft that we can provide to the CFAC. And let me unmute Rob 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to make everybody aware of this study. It was done by the Air District in combination with the South Coast Air District, as well as the 2 ports. And it looks like there's a significant possibility to remove up to over 2,000 trucks a day or a week from the I-5 corridor going into Southern California. And so it looks like a fairly significant control measure for greenhouse gases, as well as reducing wear and tear on our highways. So something to be looking into the next update of the freight plan. Thanks.
Alrighty, and then we have Michael Cano with his hand raised. So Michael, I will unmute you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. I wanted to point out a couple of things. One is we very much appreciate the participation of the various state agencies in the development of our LA County Goods Movement Strategic Plan. Our draft went live just a few weeks ago, and we are finishing public comment and bringing it back to the board in November of this year for a final adoption. Unsurprisingly, the themes that are in the CFMP and at the state level are resonating in the LA County level in terms of the intersection of equity, sustainability, and economic competitiveness. And one of the areas that I really wanted to work with the state and see if there's something maybe CFAC can dive into a little more deeply in this coming year is the discussion about economic competitiveness, especially in terms of developing a narrative, weaving together the various reports and plans and elements and studies that the state has commissioned for more of an outward-facing approach with the federal government, especially with discussion about infrastructure bills, reauthorization, the shaping of future freight programs. We definitely, I think, need to take all of this good information and the things we know and package it into, in my opinion, a very aggressive approach with our federal partners on just what exactly needs to be invested in California and how important it is to invest in that. We won't take no for an answer. I think the last round of infra, with no projects awarded to California, but only 4 awarded to California over the course of 5 years, nothing to California ports out of a $500 million intermodal fund that was set aside for such investments. And, there's just, it's just and there's also a discussion about, expanding the freight funding in the federal level to include transit projects, which then puts our agencies in kind of an internal competition in terms of what gets submitted between transit projects or freight projects in areas with ports and transit needs. So, I would very much like to, talk privately or on a subcommittee or just as an agenda item for CFAC about what is our plan as a state, as partners across the state, to have a very clear message and identification of economic competitiveness, the issues facing West Coast ports, especially our ports, and how do we elevate that to the same level of urgency as we are with the equity issues and the sustainability issues, so that we're firing on all cylinders in all 3 prongs of the plan.
Thank you so much, Michael. This is Jeannie again. That is a really, I think, valuable point and good charge for us going forward. I'd love if we could kind of take up that charge in discussion of implementation for the CFMP, and particularly your points about how we're, messaging and communicating about what the vision is for goods movement in this state. I think is incredibly valuable and worth our time. So we will add that as a follow-up to this meeting, and would be happy to have oh, sorry, that's my background noise. Happy to have a follow-up discussion with you specifically, Michael, to get your ideas about how to have that discussion. I think we now. And Karen, are you going to facilitate if we have any additional comments?
There are no additional comments, and there's no hands raised at the moment. But Michael Cano did say that even the dogs agree. Oh.
That's right. Yeah, they're barking at the mailman the one time of a day that my dogs bark. So sorry for the bad timing there. Okay, if there are no additional comments, I don't know if there's any other way that we take public comments on this in this virtual format. So I'll just pause and see if there's any additional comments, and then I can close out. All right.
I think that's about it. There's no other questions.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, I've got some action items that the team has sent me here. So the first was we were going to follow up on Nancy Pfeffer's question about the truck weight sort of sunset and what the timing is for that. Sorry, somebody trying to jump in? So that was the first item. We will follow up on that. Marlon will also be notifying the group when the CFMP is posted. As he said, we're expecting that to be next Monday, but we will send out a notice to CFAC as soon as that's been posted. On this SB 743 item, we talked about having another agenda item on our next CFAC meeting on that, and potential discussion of a subcommittee or working group to discuss that further going forward if needed. And then Yachtman and the team will be sending out the charter with revisions and track changes for your additional comments and suggestions. So hope to get your feedback on that, and just continue to invigorate this group and your engagement. And finally, we will send a survey after today's meeting with the recording and presentations, but we'd love your input on how to make this virtual format even more engaging. I know there are some limitations of, how to have discussion and breakout groups and things with the technology that we use, but we really do want this to be a space where we can, engage in discussion and really advance some, great ideas and get your expertise, solicit your input. So we'd love your feedback on that. And I believe those were the key action items. So with that, we are at the end of our agenda. Thank you all again so much for hanging on for a pretty long morning on WebEx with us. Really, again, appreciate your engagement in CFAC and your support of our statewide efforts on freight and goods movement. Thank you all, and we'll be in touch very soon.